A very good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon.
Obviously I'm under a lot of pressure from William on this elevator speech. I must say that, I must confess that I'm very much encouraged by the energy and the dialogue and discussion that transpired this morning. It makes me very excited to be here today. I'm not so sure about the last hand clap you gave me, but certainly the dialogue this morning was remarkable. I stand before you this afternoon as the CEO of DBGS. And again, the description of DBGS is actually on the screen. What we are in a nutshell, we are farmers, we are investors, and something I need to emphasize upfront is that one of our prerequisites, obviously, as investors, is that whatever we do, from day one, we have to bring our communities on board. That is a prerequisite to our business model, because without the communities, you don't have a sustainable business. Another thing that's very important to put out there is that we are not consultants, so we're actually farmers. Now, I just wanted to kind of get started on what is it we bring to the table as DBGS. And clearly, obviously, we want to be a leading developer of farms across Africa. And we are very open in the fact that we want to make sure that we have the best-in-class farms that we actually build. And the basis of our strength is actually the know-how and the technology that comes out of New Zealand. That is the basis of what we actually bring to the table. And this is really around a pasture-based system, and also a very strong genetics. I know I've had dialogue with a few of you. We talk about some of the genetics that are here in Uganda, but I think we also bring fairly solid genetics as well, which are very specific for tropical regions. So I think there's a lot of synergies based on what's happening in Uganda and what we can actually bring to the table. And if you look at our approach, is really to look at how can we look at investment opportunities that are greenfield and also that are brownfield as well. So we're very open to that. And the reason why we're here, to go back to William's earlier point, is we're looking to collaborate with different stakeholders that are relevant to what we want to accomplish. And as I listen through to all the conversations that were taking place this morning, it's pretty much virtually most of you are potential collaborators for us for what we actually want to achieve in this mandate. What you have in front of you is the team that I represent, and the point that I just want to emphasize is that out of this team, there's over 50 years experience in beef and dairy across the world. And not only that, there's also over 60 years experience in general management on the African continent that actually brings to the table. So there's a wealth of experience that we actually bring to the table. That's the credentials of the rest of the team that we have. Now, if I can just shift gears and kind of go into the details and speak about what are the leverage points that we bring using the technology out of New Zealand. And again, it goes back to the fact around intensive pasture-based systems that we actually bring. The key aspect around pasture-based systems is really around low cost, because quite frankly, milk is a commodity. The key thing is you have to produce the milk with quality, but at the lowest cost. And I'll talk a little bit more about New Zealand, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with New Zealand. But New Zealanders are they are the top dairy market in the world. And when you speak to the farmers in New Zealand, the dairy farmers at least, they don't refer themselves as dairy farmers. They say to you very frankly and clearly that they grow grass. That's what they do, because that's where the money is. So that's what we actually bring to the table. Another key aspect is obviously around R&D and technology efficiency. And when you think about us being bullish in Africa, about leapfrogging how we actually develop our systems, it's very important that we start to embrace technology And that will allow us to leapfrog whatever we come up with. And one key aspect that we also bring to the table are systems and processes that allows you to do that. We have the right software that we can actually bring to the table, but most importantly, there is elements around capability that we can actually bring from New Zealand to build our local capability as well, for us to be able to execute this on our own. As I speak about all this, another point of connection here is how do we partner with local universities, how do we partner with local institutions for us to be able to build this capability and ensure that the capability actually remains on the continent, particularly in Uganda. So, as I mentioned earlier on, is for us to achieve our vision on the continent, and I make particular reference here to Uganda, is that as DBGS, we have to be an integrator. We have to be a solution provider, and we have to actually be in a place where we have the ability to bring all the actors of the industry together. And again, I refer to New Zealand, a small little country sitting at the far end of the world, but they produce 3% of the world's milk. And out of this country, they produce on an annual basis enough milk to feed over 100 million people. And the question is, why can't we do it in Uganda? And we are going to do it in Uganda, and we should do it in Uganda. And that's the attitude that we should have around that. They actually have more cows than people. They have more cows than people. We're talking about some of the land issues earlier on, about how do we manage the land. For those of you who've been to New Zealand, or those of you who plan to go to New Zealand, one of the things that you find is that even though they have more cows than people, when you drive down the countryside where they have all these dairy farms, you can never know or even get the feeling that there are more cows than people. But it comes back to how they actually manage the land. So there's a lot of expertise that we can learn from them, that we can bring to this part of the world. But most importantly is, the attitude is that if New Zealand can do it, why can't we do it in Uganda and also be in the same space? If you start to think about what does this all look like, what you have in front of you is essentially the model. We coming in as investors, and we see ourselves as a Trojan horse or a beachhead that allows to build scale. For you to make significant difference in any venture, particularly in dairy, you've got to have scale. And you've got to have an organization that has enormous pressure to actually succeed. And that can be a catalyst for success in any market. And as I mentioned earlier on, supported by that, there's a prerequisite that from day one, you bring the communities on board. Not only the communities, but you also bring all the other actors on board. You need to bring the off-takers on board, you need to bring the government on board, you need to pretty much bring in the research centers, NGOs, everyone has to come on board. And that way, we're able to actually build scale and make a significant difference in all these ventures. So it's very, very important that we think of this as an ecosystem that can actually be able to help us drive value in the respective market. And that's the model that we are sticking to. And I'm glad to know that the PAC made it also very clear that it's really about an ecosystem for us to be able to make progress in these ventures. And as I mentioned again, we bring best-in-class technical expertise, in-depth knowledge of Africa, a leading investment track record, and we also have a very robust pipeline across the continent. We've also done a lot of work, not only in Africa, we've done a lot of work in Latin America. And again, after the meeting, I'm more than happy to share with you some of the experiences in Colombia and Ecuador and all those markets. And I'm hoping in the very near future, we can also have experiences that we talk about of the work that we'll do in Uganda. Just as a side, before I step down and hand over to the next presenter, I just want to talk about an area that we are very passionate about as DBGS. And this is an area around overgrazing. It's not just a problem, I'm sure, in Uganda, but it's a problem across the continent. And I've put up one example here that says that if you look at communal grazing in Ethiopia as an example, they do as little as 3 tons of matter per hectare. And what we have actually proved in Colombia and Ecuador is that you can actually move it up to 20 tons, which is fairly significant, by actually addressing those basic fundamentals. And again, we had the PS speak about the environment, and I think this is a fundamental aspect that we all need to pay attention to as we move forward. There are other examples of models that you can actually use, which is called a milk share, where the government owns the land, and you bring on board farmers that do the milk sharing, and then there's sharing of resources. Again, it's another example that I'd love to chat with you, for those of you who have interest, on how that can work. And this has worked for 4 years in New Zealand, and I'm sure it can actually work in this part of the world. I'm not so sure what happened to that, but essentially, in summary, what I want to say is that for us to succeed in dairy, we need a Trojan horse that can consolidate and bring in the communities on board. And we need to have local sourcing, right? We need to have local sourcing with offtake agreements, and we need to have discussions around the effect on land. For as us as investors who come and invest on land, to invest in a country, it's very important that the government realizes that our investment is not short-term, it's long-term. So discussions around land tenure is also very critical as well. So for me, those are the 3 key points that are relevant and pertinent for me. I thank you all for listening, and looking forward to working with you in the near future. Thank you.